Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at our last business success webinar of this cycle. Today we have a very special friend to the chamber. Once more, we'd like to have Sam Groves. She will be presenting how to do business with the federal government. So she'll be doing a two-part special presentation today. She'll first start with federal contracting and then move on to the second element here. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be on the lookout for any questions, so Sam can answer those for you. As well, you could raise your hand and I could go ahead and unmute you, so that way if you want to ask her directly, you may do so as well. And then I also encourage you all to visit our website. We have a couple of new programs and workshops in the calendar for this summer. So please make sure to join us as well. And be on the lookout for our email, since we'll be sharing more information about these workshops and more information about our future plans in the next coming months. So with that, I'd like to have Sam kick us off for today. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate your support of this business success webinars and having you present today as well.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I want to thank the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Ascend program, and the CARES program for inviting me to participate in this workshop this morning. Basically, what we're going to do is do an aerial overview of how the federal government's procurement system works. And for those of you who are already familiar with the federal government, this is probably going to be old news to you, but hopefully we'll still give you some information that could be of value to you. Okay, next slide, please. This is what we're going to be covering this morning. I'm going to be talking about what the federal government purchases, how the federal government does its purchasing, and how to get the government to purchase from you and your company. Next slide, please. Basically, the federal government is one of the largest consumers of goods and services in the United States. And the federal government purchases everything that any other corporate entity purchases. And if you take a look at, like, for instance, military installations like Luke Air Force Base right here in the Phoenix area, installations are like small cities, and they have all of the same requirements for goods and services that any other small city would need: utilities, construction, commodities, all of that. And depending on what your company does and what your company provides, you're going to do your research, and you're going to see which business entities are looking for the services, supplies, or goods that you provide. Next slide, please. Now, the government marketplace spends over $500 billion a year, and that's spread out for commodities, supplies and services, construction, all of that. So, like I said, the government is one of the biggest consumers for goods and services in the United States. Provides a lot of employment within their agencies as well. And most federal agencies have a goal of doing at least 23% of their contracts going to small businesses. Now, this is a goal that's mandated by the Small Business Administration, which is the federal agency that was set up for advocating for nurturing, and for basically supporting the small business community. And they do a great job of it. They are the ones that give all of the small business goals to the various federal branches of service and all the various agencies. And those agencies then at their levels are required to try to meet those goals as much as possible. Now, contracting with the federal government is not the same as contracting with state and local governments. Okay, the process is a little bit different. One of the things that you're going to find out about the federal government is very, very regimented, very, very standardized, and what we refer to as being fairly uniform. Now, all of the federal agencies, we're talking about the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, all the federal agencies, they're similar in the way that they do their contracting, but it's not identical. Each agency will have their own specific nuances of how their paperwork might look and how they actually do their processes. But in general, compared to the commercial sector, the federal sector is, like I said, much more uniform, much more standardized in how things are done. Next slide, please. Now, some of the benefits of doing business with the federal government is that because the federal government mandates small business goals for agencies to meet, there is a lot more opportunity for small businesses to be successful in the federal sector. Contracting officers, especially at the local levels, are required to support the small business program. And when you're not giving a contract to a small business, you actually have to do paperwork to substantiate your decision, why you're not going with the small business. Small business always comes first. We have, like I said, subcontracting goals. Most of the time, you get paid on a timely manner from the government because there are clauses in the contracts that require the government to pay interest if they don't make their payments on time. And in economic times that are good or bad, you can still count on a steady stream of revenue. You will get paid by the government. And working for the federal government gives you the opportunity to diversify your business portfolio. The way that the government does this business, the processes and procedures that the government is required to follow are fair and they are transparent. Because I understand in the commercial world, sometimes the contracting is it's almost like the wild, wild west. You take your chances with the documentation and whether or not you're going to be treated fairly and whether or not you're going to get paid. You don't have to worry about that with the federal government. And one of the great things about the federal government is they have a number of agencies out there that they've created that exist specifically to provide you with resources and to help you as a small business get into the federal sector and to become successful. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Nope, one back. Nope, there should be, the next one should say the challenges. Oh, okay, we've got a slide missing then. Okay, well then let me just go ahead and talk to it then. There's also challenges of doing business with the federal government. And some companies in doing the research decide that they don't really want to work for the federal government because some of the challenges include time and money. It takes time to get yourself to where you're actually receiving contracts. And it could cost you money in marketing, money in your business development, and putting together proposals. Because in general, you're going to be competing for contracts. And for those large dollar acquisitions, proposal preparation could run you into some money. So those are all things that you need to consider before going into the federal sector. For instance, the long business development cycle, it takes normally 18 to 24 months to develop your business development, creating relationships with contracting people, with small business specialists, and getting your information out there so that you can be positioned to start competing for contracts. And because the government is the government, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's always going to be a lot of more standards, more regulations, rules that you have to follow. And some of the compliance requirements could be a little bit more complicated. You have to familiarize yourself with the compliance requirements that may be on your contract. In order to get into the federal sector, to do your business development and do your marketing, you've got to connect with the right people. And depending upon what it is that your company provides, you have to do your research and determine which agencies and which points of contacts within those agencies you need to be connecting with. And when you get with the right people, the small business specialists, et cetera, they can help you position yourself to start winning contracts, okay? And tips for new contractors, you have to be able to compete, create a best value offer, and then position yourself to win, okay? It takes strategy. Okay, now next, the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. Okay, learning the language, just as you do in any other field or any other industry, you have to familiarize yourself with the terminology that's being used. And in the federal government, you I'm sure have all been exposed to some of the terminology that the federal government uses. Sometimes the words and the acronyms, the phrases, et cetera, that the federal government uses may be a little bit different in connotation compared to what you're used to in the commercial contracting world. And the federal government loves acronyms, okay? One of the things that you need to make sure that your proposals do when you're putting your proposal together and you're competing for an acquisition is the proposal needs to articulate that you understand what the requirements are. For example, design, bid, build in construction is not the same as design, build. And you need to familiarize yourself with the terminology that the federal government uses so that you understand that when you're seeing terminology in the request for proposals, you understand what the federal government is asking for. You're able to interpret it and you understand what the federal government is asking for. And as in anything else, if you don't do your research and you don't familiarize yourself, what you don't know can and will hurt you, especially when you're trying to compete and get those contracts. And when you're communicating with the government, knowing the language that the government folks use demonstrates that you're serious about doing business with the federal government because you've got yourself educated, you become familiar and knowledgeable about how the government works, how the federal government does its acquisitions and expresses its requirements. And it lets those folks know that you're serious, you want to do business with the federal government. Okay, next slide, please. Now, as an example for you folks that are new to the federal sector, these are just some key items, key terms that you'll hear over and over again with federal contracting. Okay, now the SAM system is the System for Awards Management. That's the new consolidated online website that you will get registered in as a contractor, and you will do your hunting for contracting opportunities. And that's where you get your basic information. This is the consolidated system that all of the agencies are going to now. DUNS, Dun and Bradstreet numbers. Now, DUN stands for Data Universal Number. Okay, the Data Universal Numbering System. And every business entity is required to have a DUNS number. And every business entity is required to have a CAGE code. CAGE code is the Commercial and Government Entity Code, or CAGE code. And basically it's a unique identifier that's assigned to each company. When you go in and register in SAM, you can be assigned your CAGE code and your DUNS number if you don't already have those. Now, beta.sam.gov, that's the website that it used to be called FedBizOps. It's now the beta.sam.gov, where you go in and you can, again, look for contracting opportunities. NAICS codes are the special codes that are assigned to each industry. And you need to be familiar with what NAICS codes your company has. And when you're registered in SAM, it's a registration that you're going to be updating on an annual basis. One of the things that you're required to input in your registration in your company profile are the NAICS codes for the various services or supplies that you provide. And you want to make sure that you do update that on an annual basis. As you're doing different projects, especially in construction, you may increase the number of NAICS codes that you are qualified to perform. So you want to make sure that it's always updated and it's always inclusive of all the NAICS codes that you can perform. And the FAR, F-A-R, of course, that's the Federal Acquisition Regulation. That is the Bible for all federal contracting people that tells us how to do federal contracting. The policies, the procedures, the documentations. This is what sets the standards and the policies that contracting people are supposed to follow. And if you want to be doing business in the federal sector, go online, find the FAR, because it's offered online now. You don't have to buy it in hard copy anymore, those huge books. And get in there and start looking at the FAR and familiarize yourself with the various chapters. Now, the chapters of the FAR are referred to as parts. And the different parts of the FAR governs and addresses different aspects of federal contracting. And if you want to be operating in the federal sector, you want to get in there, familiarize yourself with the FAR, those sections that are that pertain to your business. Next slide, please. Okay, keep going. Yep, this is the more detailed information for each of those things. Keep going, please. NAICS codes. Yep, the North American Industrial Classification System, or NAICS. Yep. So keep going, please. Okay, and then what I did was I inserted some example of NAICS codes, especially for those who are in the construction field. And you'll have your basic NAICS code, and then it's broken down into sub-NAICS codes. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that your registration has the correct NAICS codes for what it is that you do. Because when contracting officers are getting ready to do acquisitions, they do their market research to see who is available out there and is interested and qualified to compete for their acquisitions and then possibly perform on an awarded contract. One of the ways that they search for is by NAICS codes. So you want to make sure that if you want to be included in any kind of consideration for possible competition, you want to make sure that you got your NAICS codes updated. Okay, next slide, please. And again, this is more of an explanation of what the FAR is and the various parts of the FAR and which part governs what aspect of the acquisition. If you're in construction, for instance, you want to familiarize yourself with FAR Part 36. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Now, how the government purchases, okay? You want to be in the know and you want to familiarize yourself with the various programs and the various strategies that the government uses. And all of these various, like for instance, construction is another example. The various strategies that the government will use in outsourcing its construction requirements could be looking at design, could be doing standalone contracts, single contracts for single projects. It could be the source selection could go full and open, which means it's unrestricted, means every size business is allowed to compete for it. Or it could be looked at as a set aside, meaning that the acquisition is specifically set aside for a particular category of small business. And of course, you have to be familiar with those small business set-asides, those categories. If you are a small business, you want to get with the SBA, that's the Small Business Administration. They can help you determine what category of small business that you are qualified for, that you're eligible to be in. And once you determine that, then those set aside acquisitions, if you're in that particular category, you'll be able to compete for those particular contracts. And one of the acquisition categories for small business is the 8A program. And the government often will look at putting aside an acquisition and saying that it's conducive to be awarded as an 8A sole source. And in that case, that means it's without competition. They have an 8A company that they've met, meets the qualifications. They're satisfied that the company is capable of performing. And as long as it's under the threshold for sole source, which would be the $4.5 million threshold, it can be awarded non-competitively to an 8A sole source company. Okay. One of the other types of strategies that the federal government uses is for construction are MACC, M-A-C-C. That's the multiple award construction contracts. MATOCs, multiple award task order contracts, and SATOCs, JOCs, etc. Those are contracts that are referred to as IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. And those contracts are awarded, and the actual work, the individual projects, are then given to the successful contractor who gets the award. They're given to them as task orders or delivery orders. And those contracts that were done as multiple award, it means that more than one contractor received award of the basic contract, and that contractor, along with the others that were given awards, are the only ones that would be eligible then to compete for the individual delivery orders or task orders. Now, BOAs are your basic ordering agreement. That is another way that the government does acquisitions. And basically what it is, it's not a set contract. The BOA is simply a government document that has the rules of engagement for the contractor and the government, and they can then go on and award contracts or delivery orders against that BOA, okay? And then task orders, as I mentioned, again, those are the individual little mini contracts that are awarded against the IDIQ that gives the contractor their actual work assignments, the individual projects. So now these are just some basic methodologies that the government uses specifically for construction. They also use some of these for service contracts. And then there are other ways that they go out and purchase commodities and supplies. But you find all of this in the FAR. You'll find the definitions for each of these in the FAR. You'll find the processes and the procedures that the government follows in regards to doing their acquisitions and using these various types of contracts. So you want to get in there and familiarize yourself, okay? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now the key players. These are the people that you want to familiarize yourself with, introduce yourself to. These are the folks that you're going to be doing most of your marketing to. Okay. The contracting specialists and the contracting officers, those are the folks that actually do the negotiations. They are the ones who conduct the source selections, and they're the ones who go on and award the contracts and then manage the awarded contracts afterwards. Those are the folks that are basically your employers for the government on behalf of the government. Contracting officers have warrants that specifically authorizes them to create a liability for the government. They are the ones who actually sign the contracts, which creates a liability to the government. to make sure that you get paid by the government. Now, when you go in and you get to know some of the government folks, you'll be talking to technicians, you're going to be talking to scientists, you'll be talking to engineers, depending on what industry you're in and what service or product you provide. But know that those people, they're the ones who create the requirements, but they're not the ones who award the contracts. Only a contracting officer with a warrant is authorized to sign a contract, okay? Small business specialists, these are contracting people. They're in the contracting career field too, but they specialize in the small business program. And these are the first people that you want to meet when you want to get your foot in the door to meet someone within the government, a government agency like the DoD or the Air Force or the Army, one of the branches. You always want to introduce yourself to the small business specialists first, because they are basically mandated to go out and meet small businesses like yourselves and do the research and find out who is out there and who is qualified and who is interested in doing business with the government. They in turn will then notify the contracting officers and the contracting specialists who's out there. So the gatekeeper, so to speak, to an agency or a military installation is always going to be your small business specialist. The Small Business Administration, as I mentioned before, that is an agency that was specifically created by Congress to assist, nurture, and advocate for small businesses. And as I mentioned before, they are the ones who actually create the small business goals that each agency is required to meet when it comes to the various categories of small businesses. In the Department of Defense, the agencies include Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army, the Navy, Air Force, the Defense Logistics Agency, the Marines. I mean, all of the DoD agencies, they do their own contracting, and they have specific ways of how they do it. So you want to become familiar with that. If you're interested in doing business with the Air Force or with the Army, or specifically Army Corps of Engineers, because that's the agency within the Army that does construction. They are the kings of construction. You want to get in and you want to do your homework, get to know those agencies, get to know the kind of requirements and the kind of contracts that they do, so that you can get yourself positioned to get to know them, to make yourself familiar to them, and to compete for their acquisitions. Other agencies within the federal sector include GSA, which is the General Services Administration, and then VA, Veterans Administration. DHS, of course, is the Department of Homeland Security. There's DOE, Department of Energy, and the Bureau of Land Management, USDA. All of those various agencies, they're all federal agencies, and they are all governed by the rules and the procedures that are in the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And as I mentioned, they are required to follow the rules of the FAR, but how they do their own individual types of contracts and the type of products and services that they individually purchase, there'll be some nuances that may be a little bit different with each of those. So you want to get in there and do your research and get yourself familiar with them, okay? And you want to keep in touch with a small business specialist. You want to find out when they're going to have their outreach events, conferences, trade shows, things like that, so that you can attend and hear forecasts of upcoming opportunities. That's where they start announcing some of the requirements that they anticipate working on within a certain fiscal year. Now, the government's fiscal year goes from the 1st of October through 30 September. And during those fiscal years, depending upon programs that have been approved at the congressional level, the contracting people, especially at the local level, will know those projects, those contracts, those acquisitions that they're going to be working on. And because they are required to try to seek as much competition as possible, they want to get out there, and they want to communicate those requirements to you out there in the business sector, to let you all know what's coming down the pike so that you can get ready to compete for all of that. And you want to see what's posted in beta.sam.gov. So get yourself into that website and learn how to navigate that so that you can find opportunities that have been advertised and published. And then that'll let you know also what's being anticipated for forecasted opportunities. And for those contracting acquisitions that they're actually working on, the agency will post information in beta.sam.gov so that you will know what stage or phase of the acquisition process that they are in. And as with anything else, you business owners know that networking is vital and important to build relationships. Okay, next slide, please. Now, how do you get the government to purchase from you? Basically, you do your homework. Just like any other endeavor that you're doing, you're going to do your homework. You're going to research the opportunities, and you're going to determine how you would provide a creative or innovative solution to what the government needs. What makes you unique? What's special about what you offer as opposed to your competition? And then be able to articulate that in your proposal. You'll be able to articulate it as you're meeting them face to face to tell them about your company. You want to learn the language, read everything that you possibly can, review everything, and get to know the players, okay? Just like you would do your homework and you prepare yourself strategically in any other endeavor, from starting your business, creating your infrastructure, and then moving forward and getting contracts and bringing in business for your companies. You do the same thing when it comes to getting ready to compete in and be successful in the government, the federal government sector. Okay, next slide. Some tips for successful marketing to the federal sector. Start with the local levels first. You want to meet the small business specialists, as I mentioned before. And those small business specialists, they can also give you guidance and advice on how to market to individual agencies, to individual military installations, for instance. Small business specialists can be fountains of information for you because it serves them to help you be successful in the federal sector. The more small businesses that are out there competing for government business, the greater the pool of good contractors and the greater the chance for having a successful contract and meeting the government's requirements. It behooves the government to work together with contractors, okay? Because they depend on contractors to help them get the work done. Another way of marketing yourself is introduce yourself and get to know the prime contractors, those that are already successful in the federal sector, that are already performing in the federal sector. Get to know them and ask for subcontracting opportunities with them. Often, you may be able to actually have teaming arrangements with them and create possibly a mentor-protege relationship with one of those prime contractors. How do they become successful? Study them, get to know them so that you also can become successful. And again, when you get yourself out there and you meet local contractors, other subcontractors, you do a good job, they get to know you, and you're creating relationships with them. Often they will endorse you if they know about you. When the government is out there hunting for specific trades, specialty trades, sometimes a contractor will endorse maybe your company. They can't perform on it, they can't provide, but they can tell the government about you, saying, well, I can't do it, but I know of this other contractor who can. And oftentimes, through word of mouth, contractors will endorse and promote each other. And working together like that, it helps all of you grow. Okay. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, remember that you are not alone in this. You've got agencies out there that are specifically there to help you. You've got the SBA, but there's another organization out there too that was created by Congress. It's called the PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. The PTAC for Arizona is located at the Glendale Community College. That's where their offices are. And they exist also to help you grow, to help you be successful, to help you find business opportunities, and to get your company ready to compete. They can help you with your business plan. They can help you with your finances, help you seek additional capital. And as I mentioned, they are there to help small businesses grow. Another agency that's out there to do that same thing too is the MBDA, the Minority Business Assistance Center. They help contractors normally at the $500,000 or $1 million revenue level, those who've had some success, and the MBDA will help you grow even further to expand your footprint in whatever industry you may be in. But they also exist to help businesses grow. Okay. Make sure that you have positive relationships with your fellow subcontractors and the prime contractors out there so that you can leverage that. Okay. And everything is built on creating relationships and partnerships. Next slide, please. You have to be patient because, as I mentioned, the business development cycle can take 18 months to 24 months, oftentimes in the federal marketplace. You have to be patient. And you plan that in your marketing and your business development strategy. Basically, what you're doing is you are creating relationships, getting to know the federal sector and who's in it, and what the requirements are so that you can position yourself to be successful. For those of you who qualify for the various categories of small businesses, you want to get with the SBA to see if you are eligible to apply for the 8A program, for example, or for HubZone, or if you are in fact a service-disabled veteran and you own your own company. There's all these various categories of small businesses. And if you are eligible for them, you want to get yourself positioned in there so that folks will know that you are certified within those and you are eligible to compete for acquisitions that are set aside specifically for those categories. And as you're looking at opportunities that are coming up, get out there and start bidding on things so that you can familiarize yourself with how the proposals are put together, how the government does its evaluations, and how they make their selections for successful offerers. And just get out there and play. Play out there. You know, it's just like the lottery, for instance. You can't win if you don't play. So get out there and start bidding and start competing for things. And the best thing for most contractors is to start small. You get experience, you start acquiring past performance assessments, and people get to know you. You get to know the government, and you're positioning yourself to win, to be successful. But you have to be patient. Things move kind of slowly in the government. So, and as always, becoming a subcontractor can help you get your foot in the door. A lot of contractors, when they come out, they want to start immediately as prime contractors. And frankly, Some of them just are not ready to be prime contractors yet. So they should think about starting as a subcontractor and getting themselves in the door that way, and then start to familiarize yourself with how the federal government works. Okay, next slide. And with anything else, you want to have a plan. And as you're looking at your business strategy, what your plans are for your business development, and whether or not you want to stay a commercial contractor, or if you actually want to venture into the federal sector, you need to have a plan. And these are some of the things that you're going to keep in mind for that. What qualifications and capabilities, what are your core capabilities for your company? You want to make sure that you're familiar with that and you're able to articulate that. And again, the small business program, what certifications are you eligible for? If you're eligible, go out and seek them, because that gives you an added advantage with the competition out there. Okay. If you need additional capital, you may want to think about going to the SBA for loans. They have various loan programs. Talk to your counselors there with the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, and they can also give you advice and guidance as to how you can seek additional capital if you need it. Mentor protege programs, where you are actually in an agreed to relationship with another company, a larger company, a successful company. That company is going to be helping you grow, helping you get in the federal sector and helping you become successful. And because you are in a formal mentor protege program that is sanctioned and approved by the SBA, you can actually take advantage of that mentor's resources, their financing, their advice, their assistance, without it counting against you. Okay. Take a look at other contractors. If you want to form a teaming arrangement, strategic alliance, going after a particular acquisition, maybe it's going to take a team to go after the acquisition so that you can bring everything to the table that the federal government is looking for. It increases your ability to meet the government's requirements and possibly win a larger acquisition. And then, of course, joint ventures where you're teaming with another contractor and creating a third entity, and you're competing for something as the joint venture. Okay. Or maybe within your strategy, you decide that for your particular company, for the supplies or services that you provide, maybe you want to go it alone. But everything that you're looking at is strategically considered, and it's a plan. Okay. Plan for results. All right. Next slide, please. And again, who do you talk to when you decide to go into the federal sector? You want to make contact with the small business professional first, because every agency, every installation has a small business person. And that person then in turn will introduce you to the contracting officer and possibly the program manager. Be thoughtful of who you begin with. Okay. You always want to begin with that small business professional. The small business specialist or professional is going to be cognizant of all the acquisitions, all the projects, all the contracts that are coming down the pike, and they can talk to you and advise you. Okay. So that's always your first contact. Next slide, please. And when you're making contact and you're getting out there and marketing your company, what do you provide? First thing you want to provide to the small business specialists, or if you're introduced to a contracting officer, or even at a conference or a trade show, if you happen to meet a program manager, one of the things that you want to provide to them is a written capability statement that presents all the core capabilities of your company. And you might have a brochure and a business card, your basic marketing materials. All right. And you want to make sure that you can provide them with a link to your website. And your website should contain the information that I've got listed right there. And that's where you really get your name and your company out there. so that when the contracting people are doing market research to find qualified sources, we want to make sure that you are out there, your website's out there to tell them that you're one of those people that you want to be considered, that your company can do the job, has done the job, and can successfully perform whatever requirement they have. Okay. Next slide. And I always try to tell contractors, especially when they go into the federal sector for the first time, try to avoid costly mistakes. You don't have to pay for these, like the DUNS number and registering in SAM or obtaining a GSA contract or whatever. There are companies out there that will say that they can guarantee you a contract if you sign up with them and pay some kind of exorbitant amount of money. Nobody can provide, nobody can guarantee a contract. Not even a contracting officer can promise somebody a contract. Okay, that's not how the federal government works. Everything, you have to compete for it. And there's certain rules and regulations that they have to follow. Okay. And the resources for getting you registered and your DUNS number, your cage code, all of that kind of stuff, there are agencies out there that can provide that service to you for free. So don't sign up with some consultant or somebody else who promises you for some crazy amount of money that they can guarantee you a contract. Okay. One of the things that small businesses have to be careful of, because you are small and your marketing and your business development budget may be small. Be careful about how you spend your money, and don't waste your money paying for things that you can get for free from the government through various agencies such as the SBA or the PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or through the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency. There are other agencies out there also that have been set up by the government to provide free services to you. Okay, so take advantage of those agencies and their expertise. They're there to help you. Okay, and as you're getting yourself positioned to compete for contracts in the federal sector, there's important steps that you want to remember to do. Okay, obviously your market research, obviously capture targets, educate yourself and leverage your free resources and all that, and plan and strategize. Those are real obvious. If you're a successful business owner, you're already doing that. Otherwise, your business wouldn't have been successful. Now you just have to extrapolate the skills and the knowledge that you've developed and using it to go into the federal sector and getting yourself ready to compete in that particular arena. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide after that. Okay, and then this is just the basic list of how you prepare for the federal contracts. You know, again, a lot of this we've already covered, but this is just a summarization of how to get yourself ready to compete in the federal sector. Next slide, please. That's it. That's the last slide. So hopefully this has been of value to you all, especially for you that are very new to the federal sector. These slides will be available to you so that you can read them at your leisure, because I know that this is a lot of information. Okay. And if you have specific questions, please reach out to your consultants at the SBA, the PTAC, and the MBDA. Okay. Okay, now we're going to move into the next presentation, if we still have time. Okay, we're going to talk about effective capability presentations. So can we put that slide deck on, please?
Yes, we have about 10 more minutes left.
Okay,
so
then
if
I
anyone...
will go through this very quickly then, very quickly.
Sounds good.
Okay, because these slides will also be available to everybody so they can read it at their leisure later.
Exactly.
But basically, yep, as one of your marketing strategies, you want to make sure that you're able to provide an effective capabilities presentation. If you ever get in to meet the small business specialist or the contracting officer, you want to be able to convey your core capabilities in a very professional manner. And what this presentation covers is all the different things that you want to keep in mind, okay? So the overview is planning your capabilities presentation, the basic format of an effective presentation, especially when you're presenting to the government. There is a template that we put together that we like to give most contractors that provides the formatting and the information that needs to be completed or included in an effective presentation. And of course, we finished up with talking about your business card, okay? So next slide. Okay, when you're planning your capabilities presentation, you want to do your homework and you want to figure out who are you targeting your marketing to. You do your research, who your potential customer is, what agency within the federal government. Go out there, find out what their projected requirements are. And then obviously you want to find out who your competition is, and you want to make sure that you convey to the government what makes you different. How do you stand out from your competition? You tailor your presentation to your target audience, and depending on how much time they give you, because sometimes you're given 5 minutes to do a presentation, sometimes only 3 minutes. Sometimes it's a quick one-on-one meeting. You have to be able to convey the information effectively and articulate everything within a short time period, okay? And I always tell contractors when they're doing a presentation, capability presentation, it's best to do a dry run. Practice the presentation so that you're comfortable with talking about yourself and your company, and you can hit all of the highlights, all the major points that you want to emphasize in a short amount of time, okay? Next slide, please. The basic format of a presentation that's effective is going to include who you are, what you do, what you've done before successfully, and what you can do for the government this time around. And that's why you should be considered for possible award of the contract, competing for the contract, etc. Okay, that's what your effective presentation is going to cover, those areas. Okay, next slide. When you're talking about who you are and talking about your company, you want to do a brief description of your company's history, especially for those companies that are family owned. You may have a long history that you're proud of, but during a capability presentation, that's not the time to go into a long dissertation about the history of the company. Just keep it short and sweet. You talk about your organizational structure. You talk about your small business certifications. And you talk about your resources, your bonding capacity, what equipment and facilities you have, what assets your business actually owns versus what you have to rent when it comes to doing, for example, a construction project, things like that. And you want to talk about alignments and teaming arrangements. If you, like, for instance, if you're in a business like a joint venture, or if you're in a mentor-protege program with another company, you want to go ahead and convey that during your capability presentation. Next slide, please. This is the meat of your presentation. You're talking about the core capabilities of your company, what the NAICS codes are that you're qualified to perform. And especially if you're a general contractor, you want to talk about those things that you self-perform, that you don't subcontract out everything. The government finds benefit and advantages to giving work to contractors who can do a lot of self-performance, that everything is not subcontracted out. So you want to emphasize the things that your company actually does. Next slide. You want to highlight some of your best past performance. Talk about the various projects that you've already completed, for instance, like in construction, that you did successfully. And you want to talk about it in terms of what the magnitude was, if it was complex, if there were any special issues or things about that particular project that you want to highlight. Whether you were a prime or a subcontractor, you want to talk about that project that lets the government know that you as a contractor are able to anticipate any issues, that you could deal with it and handle it with no, with no problems. And excuse me. There we go. And that you can work pretty well independently. That the government can hand you a project and can feel confident that because you had great past performance in doing certain projects that are very similar to what they're looking at, that they can trust you to possibly perform on the future projects they may have. So you always want to include in your presentation highlights of your best projects. You want to tailor the list to what you know the current or projected requirements are going to be. So pick out those projects that are very similar in size, magnitude, and complexity. Okay. And for those contractors who have no previous work experience in the federal sector, that's okay. You've been doing it in the commercial field. So the experience and the success that you gained in the commercial sector can be extrapolated into the federal sector, because the work is going to be very similar, whether it's federal or commercial. And if you've already done it, make sure that you capture that and you let people know you've got experience, you've got skills that you've already gained. Next slide, please. Next slide, yep. Okay, next slide after that. This is the basic template that we put together that we like to give the contractors to keep in mind, okay? So, all of the information that you see on this slide here, this is the kind of information that you want to include in your presentation, in your capability statement, okay? Next slide. And again, this is the formatting, the template for, this is what you want to include, that you want to present. Next slide. And normally you want to have like maybe 3 or 4 of the best projects that you want to highlight. Again, that they're similar in nature to the projects that the government is currently looking at. Next slide. And now we talk about the business card, okay? Because all of that other information is going to be in your hard copy capabilities statement. It's stuff that you articulate orally, in person, during a capability presentation, and you can have it on your business brochure, okay? One thing that a lot of people forget is the business card, okay, that you hand out to folks. That's the first impression that people will get, is looking at your business card. And you want to make sure that on that little business card, you have all of this information in there, front and back, because you're paying for the back of the business card to use it. A lot of times I get business cards from contractors, I look in the back and it's blank. More information could have been highlighted on the back of that card too. Use both sides of your business card to your advantage, all right? And a lot of times folks they may toss out a brochure, or they may not take the capability statement, but they will take the business card. So as much information as you can pack onto that business card, it's to your advantage to do that, okay? Okay, next. I think that's the last slide. Yep, that's it. Okay, so again, this presentation will also be made available to you on the website. And then again, with all the information, you can go ahead and read it at your leisure. Are there any questions? Do we have times for questions at all?
I don't see any questions as of now, but
Okay.
appreciate your time today, Sam. Very valuable information. And like you mentioned, we will be sharing the slides from these 2 presentation decks that you provided us today with via email, along with the recording. So if you happen to miss any of it, we will be sharing that later this afternoon. And once again, thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate your time. I believe we're a little short on time, So we'll also share Sam's contact info in case there's any, additional questions that you maybe thought of after the webinar today. But appreciate your time for being with us today, and we hope you can all join us next week as we start our new series of webinars and programs. Be on the lookout for that information from us soon. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye now. Thank you, Elizabeth.